Live from Waterford and Dungarvan, this is Waterford at 1 News.
Good afternoon, I'm Sinead Aherne. Today's top stories. A new system of COVID restrictions will come into place across the country from midnight. The incidence of Covid-19 in Waterford has increased again. Taxi drivers have held a protest in Waterford City, and in sport, spectators will be allowed to attend sporting events in limited numbers from tomorrow. The government has published its new roadmap for living alongside COVID. The entire country has been placed into level 2 restrictions, though Dublin has some extra layers, as our political correspondent Sean Defoe reports.
For most of the country, the existing restrictions in place now are being extended for 3 weeks, now labelled level 2. However, Dublin is a sort of level 2 plus, with pubs not being allowed to reopen next week, people only allowed to have 6 people from one household in their homes, and spectator sport being restricted. Spectator sport is, of course, set to return under this plan, with a maximum of 200 people at stadiums that can accommodate at least 5,000, but in Dublin this will be limited to 100 people. There is work ongoing about allowing more people into larger stadiums like Croke Park and the Aviva. The 5 levels in the plan set out what's allowed in almost every sector of life over the next 9 months, with 1 the least restrictive and 5 the most. For example, for weddings can have up to 100 people in attendance under level 1, but just 6 people in levels 4 and 5. Bars, restaurants and pubs can stay open with restrictions until level 3 and move to takeaway only in level 4 or 5. Schools, colleges and creches will stay open in all 5 stages of the plan. Sean Defoe at Dublin Castle.
The 14-day Covid-19 incidence rate in Waterford has jumped again to 62 per 100,000 people. The Health Protection Surveillance Centres revealed that 72 cases were confirmed in Waterford in the 2 weeks up until Sunday. Among those are 8 cases announced last night. Waterford now has the 5th highest incidence rate in the country. It's also up in Dublin, where the rate is now 95.1 cases per 100,000 people. Louth, Leitrim and Limerick have between 63 and 66 cases, followed by Waterford on 62. Waterford has a marginally higher rate now than Kildare. The Bishop of Waterford, Anne Lismore, says it's unreasonable to think that we'll have no positive cases of COVID-19 in schools. It was confirmed yesterday that 2 secondary schools in Waterford have 1 positive case each. They're following public health advice and have been told there's no need to send any class groups home. Bishop Fonzie Cullinan praised principals and teachers for their hard work in recent weeks. He was speaking to Damien Tiernan on Daisha today.
It would be unreasonable to think that when you have, as we have, 99 primary schools and 18 secondary schools alone in this diocese, literally thousands of people coming and going, moving around, it is unreasonable to think that we're going to have 0 cases. So what do? We don't panic. We phone the HSE number, which each school has, and the procedure is followed.
HICWA says people with mild to moderate COVID-19 are unlikely to be infectious beyond 10 days from their first symptoms. It follows the announcement yesterday that the self-isolation period is being reduced from 14 days to 10. The testing process for children has also changed, as Laura Donnelly reports.
HICWA says evidence from international studies has led to the self-isolation period being reduced. It says, however, some limited evidence from a small number of studies found patients with severe to critical symptoms may be infectious for 20 days or more. Dr. Maureen Ryan is HICWA's Deputy CEO and Director of Health Technology Assessment.
No patients had infectious virus to be cultured in the lab 10 days after the onset of symptoms. In the other 5 studies, only 3% of patients presented with infectious virus more than 10 days from the onset of symptoms. So it's a reasonable assumption that people are unlikely to be infectious anytime after 10 days from the onset of symptoms.
A change in the testing process for children was also announced, as Dr. Ryan explains.
That's a deep throat and nose swab, and it can be uncomfortable and can be very difficult, particularly for children. So the change that came about yesterday was that one of the specimens we looked at was to use a nasal specimen. So that's where the nasal swab is inserted only somewhere between 1 to 2.5 centimetres into the nose.
For people identified as a close contact of a confirmed case, the quarantine period remains 14 days.
Gardaí in Tramore are investigating an assault in the town which is alleged to have happened on Sunday night. A youth sustained injuries in the incident and was taken to University Hospital Waterford with non-life-threatening injuries. Gardaí were called to Marion Terrace area at around 10 o'clock on Sunday night. Gardaí say no arrests have been made yet. However, they're appealing for witnesses to contact them on 051 391 620. Waterford's Grace O'Sullivan says there's outrage in the European Parliament at Boris Johnson's attempts to breach international law with his controversial internal market bill. Last night, the majority of British MPs passed the second reading of the bill, but there's been widespread condemnation of it from within EU circles. Here's Grace O'Sullivan.
It's such an agitation. It's like Boris Johnson has thrown a cat amongst the pigeons. He has absolutely shown by introducing this legislation his disregard of international law. And for a nation like the UK, and for a nation that we in Ireland have such huge close ties to, it has absolutely thrown shockwaves into the system.
The Minister for Foreign Affairs says he doesn't buy into the view that the South East has been left behind. Simon Coveney told members of Dungarvan and West Waterford Chamber that there are hugely ambitious plans for Waterford City as a driver for the region. He says they've been pushing to create a university for years.
If you look at what the government have been trying to do to create a university in Waterford, linking capacity with Carlow, we've been trying to push that for years. But for all sorts of more localised political reasons, that hasn't happened. And only recently we have appointed somebody new to try to bring people together to get an agreed outcome, like has been achieved between CIT in Cork and NIT Tralee, for example.
Protesting taxi drivers in Waterford City have delivered a letter to Waterford Junior Minister Mary Butler's office. They're calling on the government to provide a financial package as they feel they've been forgotten about during the pandemic. 4 associations have joined together with the same objective. Edwin's a taxi driver in the city. He says they've put a lot of money into their vehicles with no financial assistance from the government.
We just want government to adhere to all the requests, not alone the requests, from time to time, see what they can do to help us. We spend a lot of money to keep it on the top standard. And when you say standard, standard is standard. I mean, nobody expect COVID to come up. It came up and we had to spend extra money. So I'm calling on the government on behalf of the entire organizations, associations, members to please come to the aid of taxi because the people need us.
Waterford Council has been awarded €1.2 million to bring vacant social housing units back into use. It'll see 26 vacant properties in Waterford refurbished and relet to families and individuals on the social housing list. Fianna Fáil councillor Jason Murphy explains.
It will enable Waterford City Council to have the funding in place to refurbish voids or vacant housing, and these can be a blight on local authority estates, as many people will know. It's a good news story for Waterford. Substantial funding coming from the Minister O'Brien, Minister for Local Government, and I'm looking forward now, and I'll be pressing the council to draw down this funding as quickly as possible.
And €25,000 worth of drugs have been seized in County Wexford. 500 grams of clefidrone was found during the search of a house in the Enniscorthy area. A 43-year-old man who was arrested at the scene has been charged and will appear before Wexford District Court today.
Sports News on WLR.
With Virgin Media Waterford. Want super fast broadband today? Drop into Virgin Media George's Street and take it home with you. Easy as that.
People will be allowed to attend sporting events in limited numbers under the government's new Living with COVID plan announced this afternoon. From tomorrow, 200 spectators will be permitted into venues which would usually have the capacity to host crowds of 5,000 or more. Smaller grounds will be able to admit 100 people, while indoor events will be limited to 50. The plan also says that specific guidance can be developed for very large purpose-built stadia. To cycling, where Ireland's Sam Bennett is among the peloton with just around 30 kilometres completed on stage 16 of the Tour de France. The Carrick-on-Shore native has a 45-point lead over Peter Sagan in the battle for the green jersey. The riders are making the 164-kilometre trip from La Tour de Pan to Villard-de-Lans. In soccer, Aston Villa captain Jack Grealish has signed a new 5-year contract with the club. The former Irish under-21 international had been linked with a move to Manchester United several times this year. Villa are one of 4 Premier League clubs involved in second-round matches of the competition later. The Birmingham club kick off away to Burton Albion at 7:45. At the same time, Crystal Palace are away to Bournemouth. At 7:30, Newcastle host Blackburn and West Ham entertain Charlton. In rugby, Connacht have confirmed that Anne Henaghan has been elected as the province's new president. The Mayo native is the first woman to be appointed to the position at any of the Irish provinces. She stepped up from junior vice president of Connacht in 2018 to the senior vice vice president role last year. Hennihan's also a judicial officer for World Rugby. In motorsport, Lewis Hamilton won't be investigated by F1's governing body for wearing a T-shirt at the Tucson GP about the shooting of Breonna Taylor. The world champion wore it over his race suit before the race and again on the podium. It features the words, "Arrest the cops who killed Breonna Taylor." She was shot by police during a raid in Kentucky in March. Sports news on WLR is thanks to Virgin Media Waterford.